Hi, I'm Rob Cosman. Welcome to my shop. Hand-cut dovetails. Are you having trouble? Too tight, too loose? I'm going to show you a technique we have now where we can tweak it to within thousandths of an inch. Stay with me. I'll show you. This is really going to help. Before I get into this, let's talk about why do it. Obviously, you want better looking dovetails, and the idea is if we can snug them up, we can avoid any little tiny cracks. Well, I shouldn't say cracks, gaps. But the main reason that I want to do it is to maintain the level of precision in the actual building of the drawer. So you want this thing to fit perfectly. The minute you have to start using clamps to pull something together, and rarely is it only one, you're starting to introduce stress, and it's very easy to take this out of perfect square, and now you set it on a flat surface and all of a sudden your corners rock, then you've lost it. We want that to fit so that when in place, there is no detectable side-to-side movement, only a little bit of up and down to allow for seasonal expansion and contraction of the wood. Well, that means we've got to figure out a way to just literally increase these pins, or the space between the pins, just make them a thousandth of an inch smaller, and that's what I'm going to show you with the Sean shim. The most exciting thing we've brought to the dovetail process is our offset method, and I want to explain it to you briefly just so that you can see the value of it over the way we used to do it. Now, start off with that. So we would process the tailboard, completely finish it, set it on top. By the way, that's our little tape method that gives us a wall to rest against. So when you put it up, like pull the tailboard up to the pin board, everything is flush on the back side. Take a regular dovetail marking knife or something that was resembling a knife, flush up the two sides, and then carefully go in and transfer or trace the side of the tail onto the end grain of the pin board. Now you had to be careful not to go too deep, took away your precision. You had to be careful not to cut into the tail, and you also had to be careful not to allow the knife to wander in the end grain. So there you go, very light marks. Then you would come in and down the face, you would transfer those lines with a plumb line that connected the knife mark to your marking gauge baseline. With the board standing plumb, you would have to come in and cut right beside that line, and it was always a judgment call. If you're too close to the line, it'll be too loose. If you're too far away, it'll be too fat, and if you don't go in there and pair, then something's going to split. Well, we don't like to pair, so you always try to get it right on. Problem is, in some woods, the line was almost invisible, so you'd be sitting there with a bench lamp trying to highlight it. But more importantly, at the same time you're trying to line up and do this cut, you're also having to pay attention to the plumb cut, and that had to be right on the money. Now, that's not hard when you're young, but as your eyes age a little bit, this got more and more challenging. So, thanks to Ernest Joyce, which started me on this course, came up with a better way of doing it. Put the tailboard in the vise, keep it flush with the top of the plane. Set that back, tape wall on the underside, line the two pieces up. Now, thanks to Sean McDermott, who's a combat wounded vet, took one of our classes a few years ago, Sean came up with an idea that we turned into a product, and it allowed us to make a gauge that would perfectly offset these. And the reason we need to offset them, what we're doing is we're keeping the waste intact. We've got a dovetail marking knife that has a sawtooth blade in it that's the exact same as the blade in the dovetail saw that made the cuts originally. That means when you put it down in there, it doesn't wander to the left or to the right. It's going to stay put. However, if you left these flush and you did this, if you can imagine, the part down here is designed to fill all of this space. And when I say all of this space, I mean from the outside wall right here all the way over to the side of this tail. If we were to put this knife mark right down through here and continue to cut on the bottom piece, we would make that bottom piece too narrow by the width of the kerf. So what do? We simply move that top piece over the thickness of the kerf, which in this case is 24 thousandths of an inch, like so. Now, because of that little lip, when you put that blade down in there, you're actually cutting beside the pin in the waist, leaving the entire pin intact to fill from here right to the side of that tail. And of course, whatever works for the right side of this tail works for the right side of this tail and this one. And then to get the other side, you would use a little Sean shim that has 24 thou removed right here. So when you put that against the side of your pin board, when you move the top piece, the tailboard over, it now overhangs by 24 thousandths of an inch. And if going to my left worked on the right side of this tail, going to moving this to my right works on the left side of the tail. And you would simply reach down in there, careful not to disturb anything, drag that through. When you're done, you'd leave a saw mark on the bottom piece. In fact, let me do it, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. I sometimes drag that through 3, 4, maybe even 5 times, depending on the species of wood. The shape of the knife allows me to get right into the back, and I would, of course, do all of them. But when I remove it, I now have a kerf that I can push the saw down into, no guessing where it starts, and that leaves me with 100% of my attention to focus on making the plumb cut. That is a big improvement. What I want to talk to you about is how we can take it and make it even better than that. Hey, if you like this video, we have more. Our newsletter has subscriber-only content, monthly discount on tools, and anything we bring out that's new, subscribers get first crack at it. Click on the link below. Let's get back to work. So here are our tails and our pins. What we're trying to do is make it so that this joint fits a little tighter. So you can think of it as in a couple of ways. First of all, the tails aren't going to change. This becomes our template. That's our standard. What we need to do now is work with the pins to fit them in here, but we want them to be a little bit tighter. I should mention, this only works when you have one of the woods a little more compressible than the other. Classic example is drawer construction. Typically the drawers are a little bit softer wood. Shakers would often use pine drawer sides on a walnut or a cherry or a birch or a maple front. Well, the pine will compress, and that will allow you to make a little tighter fitting joint. If you're putting 2 pieces of maple together, it's got to be pretty much right on. So let's talk about this. We can do it 2 ways, or we can think about it in 2 different ways. We can either make these pins, this is actually a half pin, full pin, and a half pin. The reason it's called a half pin, it's only sloped on one side. We can make them a little bigger, or the way I'm going to try to explain to you is we can make this space a little bit smaller. Our Sean shim, these numbers stand for thousandths of an inch. So 24 starts with 23 thousandths of an inch, 24, 25, and 26. That's what the offset is between the smaller part and the larger part. Now, just for sake of letting you know, we also make one for smaller saws, starts with 18 thou and goes around to 21 thou. So if my saw were to be measured, and when we measure it right out here in the tooth line, which includes the saw plate, the actual blade, which in this case is 20 thousandths of an inch, and our teeth are set, meaning they're bent to one direction or the other. These ones are bent 2 thousandths of an inch out from the saw plate. So if you were to try to measure the kerf, you'd have to take into account the saw plate at 20 thousand, the 2 thou set on this side and the 2 thou on that side is going to give you 24 thousandths of an inch. So if we were going hardwood on hardwood, we'd want the offset to be 24 thou. What we want to do is make that a little bit tighter. So we're going to go 25 thou, but we're only going to do it on one side. So if I set my marking, my Sean shim at 25 thousandths of an inch, what that's going to do is it's going to push this piece. I'm going to revert back to this one. This is one that we're going to use before we remove the waste, so that if we were to have moved this over 25 thou instead of the 24, it would reduce, you could either say it would make this 1 thou thicker, or it would reduce this space 1/1000th of an inch. Now, that means it's going to reduce this side by 1/1000th of an inch. It's going to reduce this side by 1/1000th of an inch. It's going to reduce this side by 1/1000th of an inch. Now, what we don't want to do is make it any more than that. So I will set it for 25 thousandths of an inch, And that, like I said, will reduce the space by 1 thou. That means I'm going to do this side of this tail. I'm going to actually identify it by putting a T with a circle. That stands for tail. So whatever we do to this one, we're going to do the same to this. So this one has been moved over an extra thou. This one has been moved over an extra thou, as has this one. Now, if I want to leave it at that, then when I do my next setting, which is going to be to move the tailboard to my right, so we moved it over this way the first time, now we're going to move it over this way. But instead of going 25, I'm going to go revert back to the 24. By moving that back to the 24, then we're going to put this saw kerf is going to be right along the side of the tail, not increasing it or decreasing it. Same thing here, same thing here. Ultimately, what we've just done is we have reduced this dimension between the pins by 1/1000th of an inch, which will allow us to tighten those up just a little bit and make it an even better fit. I'm going to go and actually process this one. You've already seen me cut these dovetails, and if you haven't, I'll leave a link. But I'm going to go ahead and do this and then come back and show you how it fits. We'll put this one joint together and see how it works. Okay, so these have been cut. Space should be 1 thou smaller than the actual tails. Tail pieces are all cleaned out. We've cut chamfers on the inside. I'm going to put it together without glue. Not that I ever test fit, but just see how it holds and how well it goes together when it's snugged up like this. Now I'm going to pound this one down on. The reason is that sometimes when you're pushing like that, and if you happen to pound this one and it goes a little quicker than the rest, it can cause a split to run up there. But this way, when you're beating on this piece, it should go together uniformly. So I line it up. I always get it started by hand first. It's not a bad idea to put a square in there just to kind of stay on track in terms of keeping it square. Now I'll hold it out over the edge, just check it for square. Pull it out a little bit. Now, we'll plane that up and evaluate it. Blue. But there's what it looks like, dry, with an extra thou taken off the space between the pins. And I think that's your best bet. And again, held together. We don't have to clamp it. Best chance of getting a drawer in particular to fit exactly the way you want. If you enjoy my method of work and like my style of teaching, click on any one of these videos to help take your woodworking to the next level. I've always said better tools make the job so much easier. If you click on the plane and chisel icon below, it'll take you to our site and introduce you to all the tools that we actually manufacture right here in our shop. It'll also give you information on our in-person and online workshops.